Hi everybody, welcome. I'm Torben Anderson, I'm your host for Rewired for Success. If you are a business owner that wants to take control of your business for serious scale-up success, then you have come to exactly the right place. Whether you're a new startup or whether you've got existing technologies that you're trying to scale, or indeed you've been around for a long time and you're trying to improve what you have, then you come to the right place. Firstly, I want to thank you for joining again. You've got many podcasts you can listen to, but I just really appreciate you joining this one. And today's topic is going to be something that I think is really, really interesting. And we're going to start a series on, looking at how technology is evolving and how technology can remain performant, and how you can really scale your business. And so today is kind of an intro. It's more like a sort of a free-flowing session where we'll talk about how technology has become so abundant that it is reaching the point of being magical. And most importantly, what spurred me on to do this is a recent discussion I had with a customer who I felt was trying to paint themselves into a corner, forgetting how abundant technology had become. And again, today's topic is all about the abundance of technology and the point that technology has come to the point where it's pretty much magical. In other words, anything is possible. And really, what I'm trying to avoid is having, you, the audience, and people around the world thinking about technology as something that has limitations, because in a lot of cases it doesn't, and in a lot of cases it's just a matter of time before the acceleration and exponential growth of technology will make almost anything possible. And so I'd like to start really simply today with some basic ideas and then kind of build them up towards that overall topic today. So firstly, I think I've said this kind of thing before. If we look at your technology and what you're currently doing, one of the best things to do is to break down your processes, understand which teams and people are working on what, and think about how you can get a technology tool to work for each part of that process. For example, if you've got a sales team that run through a particular sales process as one process step, and then the next step is to kind of take that successful sale into proposal, and maybe finally into some kind of output or a document that you're going to produce, maybe a report. Then one of the best things you can do is think of those as three different technologies. Firstly, you could use your sales pipeline. You could use many applications out there. At Rewired we use pipedrive.com. When it comes to proposal writing, there are many proposal applications out there. I'm not going to particularly list them, I'll put them in the show notes, but you could use that for proposal writing. And then finally you could create documents in it could be Word, Google, or any other type of application in the cloud. Now, that's just a simple example of how you need to look at that, which really is about avoiding the need to become dependent on a particular technology, because you need to think about what would be the most hardest thing to do to leave a technology and maybe go on to another one. And so rather than being scared about leaving a technology, being scared about being able to move to something else, what is better is to think about how can you plan to continuously migrate. So we're thinking about you being technology agile, being really agile about your technology. Don't get married to any technology. Just, use something. Don't commit to the constant, annual subscriptions if it's cloud-based or a SaaS-based application. Pay the monthly, get to use it, get to know it, see if it will work for you, and then move forward from there. Just think about what you would need in place if you had to move a technology and plan for that. so that you're constantly agile, able to change, move from technologies. A great way to do this is to continually monitor your processes. If there's a change, that's a trigger. Also, don't be scared to migrate data. There are a whole host of people and tools out there that can help you do that. And invest in training. So always invest in the people part. Make sure that people are trained if you're going to move to a new piece of technology. So that's just about, kind of being agile by technology. But really, what's that got to do with today's topic? So some of that is because, technology is changing all the time, and we've got all these new technologies coming in. So what you don't want to do also is lose a fantastic opportunity to use the next best big thing. Now, of course, it doesn't mean it's the next best thing, but certainly as you grow, you may need to move off, for example, Google Docs to something more robust in terms of how your business is set up. So, just think a little bit about that and how you might do that. So, what about everyone thinking about the software that they currently have, if it's on-site? We're so careful and so keen to own our technology and have them in-house, have it on-site. But these days, using cloud technology saves a huge amount of money. Why? Because everyone is sharing an application. You get instant upgrades because everyone gets those upgrades at the same time. You don't have to bring people on site to make those upgrades or pay for expensive on-site consultants or expensive upgrades or new licensing or licenses for annual renewals. So what you want to do is think about how you can migrate your current applications into the cloud where everyone is sharing that. And it's not also always about that. There are now ways to give yourself, the same kind of control, the same redundancy, the same backup, the same security, even if you're in the cloud. In some cases, it's better because you are able to instantly control and update your environments. What else? It's all about keeping it simple. So start with a small application. If you're starting out, start on Google Sheets if you're trying to do a spreadsheet, and then look to move on to something more sophisticated. There's no harm in that. Most importantly, why it's good to do this is to make sure that you test out your process. You test out how the technology is going to help you first in an environment that's a bit, like a sandbox where you can kind of play and test and try different things. So that's a really great thing that you can try. Now, what else? How else do we keep technology agile? How else do we think of technology as being magical? So let's go a little step further. So we're in this environment where we want to move things more into an agile mode. We want to be able to change software around a bit. But what about, linking software together? Because of course, immediately one would say, well, why do we want lots of different technology if they can't talk to each other? Again, there are three great things that you can do. Firstly, with any software, normally now online, you can look up what their integrations are. So you can Google their integrations. It's normally the website's name /integrations, but sometimes it's a different link. But just go on the main website and look under either the partner or integration area, and you will see all of the different options there in terms of what that software can link to. Secondly, you can use software like Zapier, which allows you to integrate different software very easily. And Zapier will even tell you what integrations are available. And don't stop there. I was recently told that a piece of software can't integrate with another piece of software. And I was blown away because your third option is you can always build something, from scratch and work out a way to integrate things. There's always a way. Even if, temporarily you want to bring about a kind of a manual process, which you then learn how it works, and then you get somebody to build it for you. So don't think that software can't talk to each other anymore. They can integrate, and you can have data and information and triggers moving between applications. Another thing to think about when it comes to technology is if you really, really think that there's nothing out there, and in this day and age, I would say kind of flippantly that it's very unlikely that there isn't software out there that can't help you. And even if it is using something like Podio to try and create software that is more flexible, that's more designed for you. But ultimately, you can also build your own software from scratch. And it is not as expensive as you might think. There are great ways and tools to kind of hire developers these days and get out there and consider how you could potentially build your own software. Obviously, think carefully about that. Think about all the the software that's available out there. Great sites for that are Product Hunt and Sumo. I'll give those links again in the show notes. But these are great ways to search and research software that might be applicable to what you want. Now, finally, thinking ahead, what is going on with technology? So if all of that still doesn't convince you how magical technology can be and how it can solve problems, and I always think of this as, those times which you may have come across where you've been having a drink, a coffee with somebody, and they've said, I wish technology would move faster. I really expected there to be flying cars by now. Or I really expected us to have gone to, Mars by now, or something like that. Now, none of those are unrealistic expectations. However, all you have to do is tune in to what's really happening out there. People like that potentially are not tuned in to what's happening. What I mean by that is, don't just tune into CNN, don't just tune into normal news. Create your own technology channel that is using Twitter or some other kind of subscription-based service where you can get great updates on new technology. And that's a great place to start as well. And if that really still doesn't convince you, I'd like to talk about a few things. Firstly, imagine that everything can get digitized. Imagine for a moment what that might mean. Well, somebody called Dr. John Storrs Hall in 1993 came up with a theory called utility fog. And what he actually meant by that was basically millions of microscopic, tiny robots at a molecular level that, if you asked it to do something, would simply do it. And so, for example, if you wanted a new house, you'd simply, click your fingers and you would create a new house. Now, you might think that that's science fiction. Well, perhaps it is for now. But, 3D printers and things like that have already allowed us to be able to create, new shapes and new things that have never been discovered before. A great person to follow around this is a guy called Ray Kurzweil. Again, I'll provide a link for that. But all of these aspirations will ultimately become true. The ability to control your environment and digitize everything. That being even solid, physical things in the real world. And if that still doesn't convince you, then I'd like to introduce you to, an idea that is theoretical, but a physicist in 1994 called Michael Alcubierre discovered a formula for warp drive, what we see in Star Trek. He discovered a way to travel faster than light. Now, it is theoretical, but it's astounding that even since 1994, they've discovered ways that have suggested that this is increasingly possible. So, we live in this amazing time with amazing technology abundance. And so I just wanted to give you some of those almost, maybe utopian ideas, but really they're not as strange as you might think. And more importantly, they show a future path for discovery and for technology advancement. And if I can also give you a tool which would allow you to even bridge that gap with some of those crazy ideas that I've just mentioned, how can you basically become a technology futurist, a person who can think about ahead on where technology is going? For example, I used to always say, well, I can't wait for the day when my mobile phone can cook my food. And that's a great example, because when I said that, of course, mobile phones didn't have cameras. Now they have cameras, and this is continuously evolving. A great resource for this to become a technology futurist, because if you can think a little bit ahead, you may decide to stay on a technology for a little bit longer, before you move over. For example, I stopped buying CDs when I realized where, for example, streaming music was going. And I stopped thinking about buying a jukebox when I realized that you could get Spotify. So, these are all fantastic things that you can kind of use and tools you can use. And a great resource for this is somebody called Peter Diamandis. And again, these links will be provided. But he talks about the 6Ds. And the 6Ds is a tool or a process that you can use to predict and think it forward of where things might go. And the 6Ds are 1, digitization, 2, deception, 3, disruption, 4, dematerialization, 5, democratization, and 6, basically, when all of those interact with each other and things become mainstream. So, how do we think about that? So firstly, digitization. Think that everything can get digitized. Once we turn it into noughts and ones, then we're starting to move towards digitization. However, we go through a phase of deception where you're having that coffee drink where people don't believe that, for example, flying cars exist, when actually, at the time of recording this, there are several companies actually built and building and already testing in real life real flying cars. However, a lot of people will say there's no flying cars, when indeed there are. So the next stage is then once people find out about flying cars, it's then when we start getting that disruption, where, for example, normal cars get, replaced by flying cars, at least, in certain circumstances. And then the next step is that whole dematerialization. So how can we take all those physical things and how can we turn them into something that's in one place? For example, normally we'd need to have a radio, a camera, and a GPS. Now all of those things are in the palm of your hand, and that's really dematerializing those physical objects into something a lot more simple. And finally, democratizing. And democratizing is when the costs finally we get that where governments can't even control it. And the reason we get that, which is the sixth reason, is the demonetization. The fact that things get so cheap to produce that people can obtain them freely. A great example of this is cryptocurrencies, where currently people are actually printing, creating, and distributing in a democratic way their own currencies. And this is happening outside of government influence and outside of normal countries, and it's creating that globalization. So that's just a great way that you can kind of think of being a bit of a futurist. And again, these links will all be provided so that you can have a look at it. And I'd love to hear your stories. Please use a comment section either here or in any other channel that you can see this particular recording. Thanks again for your time. I know you've got many podcasts to listen to out there. I really do appreciate your time. And again, finally, if you could go over to your favorite podcast, application, search for Rewired for Success, subscribe there, and I would love to get your rating from you. Again, I'm Torben Anderson. I'm the founder of Rewired. You've been listening today to the magical, side of technology, making sure that you don't paint yourself into a corner. Think about the abundance, believe anything's possible, and in general it will be, if not now, soon, and you can get on the right path to get there. You take care and chat soon.